Hello and welcome back once again to WJ Live, powered by The Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of The Western Journal. I'm joined today by crack reporter Michael Austin, not to be confused with Crackerjack reporter AJ Shawshaw. Those are two different people.
I'll be promoted there soon.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You got a lot of work to do.
All right.
But there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay.
And by Deputy Managing Editor Josh Manning. Before we even get started today, I'm going to ask you to do us a favor, something you've heard me ask you to do before, but clearly not all of you are listening. We know by looking at our statistics internally, we know there are lots of people who watch this podcast on YouTube who are not subscribers to our YouTube channel. It is a huge help to us if you will subscribe to that channel. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you can find us easily. It's youtube.com/WJLive. Click the subscribe button and then click on that bell right next to it. That bell will ensure that you receive a notification every time a new episode of WJ Live comes up. We only do that 5 times a week, so it's not like that bell is going to be ringing for you, every 2 hours, waking you up in the middle of the night. I promise you we're not going to do that to you. Your subscription on that channel really helps us a lot, so please do that. The other thing that I'd like to make sure everybody is aware of is that you don't have to watch us on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to us and not see our beautiful faces, that makes no sense to me, but if that's what you want to do, we are on pretty much every podcast platform there is. We're on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Google, etc. Pretty much if you listen to podcasts anytime, we're where you go anyway. So that's another option for you on your commute, as you're doing the dishes, whatever it is that may put you in a place where you can listen and not watch. We're available there too, and we'd love to have you join us that way. You are an important part of this conversation. It's 3 of us talking, but we're always sort of imagining you as the 4th participant in this conversation, which you actually can be. Leave us a comment, shoot us an email, and let us know what you think. Let us know if we're off track, if we're missing an important point. We'd love to hear from you. All right, with that said, we'll get right on to the news of the day. One of the things that happened this weekend that was very interesting to me was Joe Biden trending on Twitter in a way that Joe Biden probably would not be happy about if he had any idea what Twitter is. The people who control Joe Biden's Twitter account probably weren't happy about it. Let's put it that way.
The same people who control Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It's the same team.
Barack Obama
basically
is not happy about what happened. I'll just put it that way. Joe Biden, of course, as any politician does, made a lot of promises to get elected. And then after he was elected, he continued to make promises, particularly in the context of the runoff election for the Senate in Georgia. He basically said, look, elect John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock and get a $2,000 check. That's essentially what he said. We have a video clip of a speech from, I believe it was January 5th, where he made pretty much that promise. Let's show that clip.
By electing John and the Reverend, you can make an immediate difference in your own lives, the lives of the people all across this country, because their election will put an end to the block in Washington on that $2,000 stimulus check. That money that will go out the door immediately, tell people who are in real trouble.
All right. Their election will put an end to the block in Washington on that $2,000 stimulus check.
As he said,
yeah, well, that's pretty much what he was thinking, too.
Yeah.
But the problem is the Democrats are now claiming that Biden's $1,400 that he recently proposed, added to the $600 that Trump sent out, which he did prior to that speech, is the $2,000 that Biden meant. That's what he meant. That's clearly not what he said. He said that $2,000 stimulus check, not those checks that add up to $2,000. And so over the weekend, the hashtag Biden lied began trending on Twitter. C. Douglas Golden, one of our commentary writers, wrote about that today on Western Journal. If you want to see that article, the easiest way is go to westernjournal.com. Top right part of the page, you'll see something called sections. Our searching is terrible on the website. We're in the process of fixing that, but go find sections, click on that, and a search bar will come up. We are literally in the process of redesigning that. More on that at the end of the show. But if you click on sections to get a search bar, just type in Biden lied as one word, or hashtag Biden lied if you want. That C. Douglas Golden piece will come right up and give you some more details about it. What was really interesting to me about this is the Biden lied hashtag started trending from the left, not from the right. Now, we know that there's been some disconnect between the establishment parts of the Democratic Party versus what we might call the AOC wing of the Democratic Party, the more socialist side of it. But Ryan Knight, who is an avowed socialist, his hashtag, or I'm sorry, his Twitter handle is actually @ProudSocialist. He runs a leftist podcast. He describes himself as an advocate of socialism and an activist. And he called Biden out on Twitter. We have one of his tweets, so a number of them, but let's bring that one tweet up. He just lists out. He lied about bankruptcy bill, Social Security, the Hyde Amendment, Medicare for all, ban on fracking, lied about his voting record, lied about 9 super PACs. Joe Biden lied, and I'm not afraid to say it. And essentially, he tweeted this in the context of, why are you surprised that Biden lied about stimulus checks?
Right.
Here's his record. In another tweet, he literally called Biden a, quote, pathological liar, unquote, and said, look, the Democratic Party was so busy saying Trump's bad, Orange Man bad, they didn't pay any attention to the fact that they were getting ready to elect a, quote, pathological liar.
Well, some of us tried to warn them.
Yeah, that was exactly what I thought when I saw that. So, of course, plenty of people on the right have been saying Biden lied for forever. Now it seems to be becoming a little more apparent to some in the Democratic Party as well. So my first question for you guys, there's been a lot of talk about the disunity on the right in the Republican Party in the post-Trump era. We've had for 4 years essentially Trump supporters versus more establishment types. We can call them never-Trumpers. I'd say probably not all of them are never-Trumpers by a strict definition of that phrase, but more establishment Republicans.
The Lincoln Project.
Well, those guys are
the alleged
never-Trumpers,
molester.
Yeah.
The alleged Lincoln Project. Was he alleged? He's accused of molesting, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
Or maybe not.
Yeah. I don't know that there's. Are you asking me if there's proof of it?
No, I'm just asking if he's alleged. Basically, I'm trying to dedicate as much airtime as possible
to the word
talking
alleged.
about the Lincoln Project and alleged
molestation.
male molestation.
Well, if nothing else, I think you have alleged it right here. So I think that
Republicans
qualifies.
with principles, folks. Those Lincoln Project
Yeah,
guys.
absolutely. So here's my question. There's a lot of talk. Can Republicans actually win an election ever again? There's so much fracture on the
it's
right.
the same thing when Obama won.
That's true.
Right.
Is this trend on Twitter with leftists starting Biden lied, and a lot of other people, by the way, on the left doing what's called hashtag hijacking, which is not a phrase I was familiar with because I'm 52 years old. But it's when you take that hashtag and run with it, but just put like a cute puppy picture with it or whatever.
Right.
I'm sure you guys are more familiar with it than I am. And basically try and get that hashtag to be meaningless, right? So that people see it and it doesn't mean anything anymore because they search it and they get puppy pictures or whatever, which is pretty smart strategy, but terrible public discourse.
So Twitter.
Yeah, so it's Twitter. In other words, it's Twitter, right? Is this trend on Twitter indicative of similar fractures in the Democratic Party that we've been talking about so much in the Trump era and post-Trump era in the Republican Party?
Yeah, it reminds me of after the election when House Democrats had that call that got leaked, and they were all infighting, and
quit saying
basically
defund the police.
Yeah, they had lost so many seats that the more moderate Dems were saying, look, you radicals are going to lose us the country, you're going to lose us the House, you're going to lose us everything if you keep going on, which in turn the radicals said back, well, you're just a bunch of racists. So
shocking that would be their that there would be a response of that nature from the left.
So I do think that it is representative of a big split, and I would say bigger than on the Republican side, because the radicals are motivated by an extreme left that is a really, really small percentage of voters,
right?
And it's motivating everything for them. And I think socially they're seeing a lot of costs for that. Like there's a lot of people now that are saying, well, we need a more reasonable left. Now it didn't make them come out for Donald Trump, but I think it's going to hurt them if they continue to careen off to the left going forward. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of infighting going on over that.
What do you think, Josh?
What if this isn't a split in the Democratic establishment? What if it is part of the Democratic base disconnecting itself? What if it is a group of people who are not especially ideological? They simply wanted their $2,000, and based on what the tweets sound like, that's exactly what they were. They were people who wanted their $2,000 check that Biden had promised them.
And there was a lot of just straightforward. In fact, we ran a story about this that Cameron wrote, back in November maybe, where we essentially asked the question, did Joe Biden just offer a bribe?
Yeah.
To
that was
voters,
a narrative for a while.
There was a lot of discussion. He just said, vote for me and I'll send you $2,000.
But I don't get the sense from the descriptions of these things that happened on Twitter that these are diehard Democrat voters. They sound like people who basically thought they were getting paid off.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really especially wrong with them. It's kind of what you would expect from human nature, right? So what it actually looks like a little bit to me is a bunch of people who could probably use a couple of $1,000s and who are realizing, holy smokes, I trusted Uncle Joe to help me with this, and he screwed me over.
So are those people who just don't vote next time?
Well, I'm not sure. Because, they sound pretty ticked off right now. And I wondered, back in 2015 and 2016, I had really hoped that Hillary and Trump would break the Democrat and Republican parties and that things would realign more along the lines of authoritarians and free market, free liberty-minded people. That didn't really happen. But it is interesting with GameStop and everything that happened there. You do seem to see a whole lot of people who didn't really question government that much before, didn't really question. They were kind of content with the big guys.
They weren't active.
They weren't active. And now they're all of a sudden realizing, oh, man, these guys are taking advantage of me every which way. And then, of course, Biden broke sort of the cardinal rule. The cardinal rule in socialism, I think, is that you tax a whole bunch of people so that it's very difficult to tell where the money is coming from, and then you award it to a few who really can tell, oh man, this is a lot of money for me, good for me.
Right.
And they kind of reversed it on this. They're not taking money from anybody, and the people who thought they were getting the money feel like they're getting screwed now. So I wonder if this is kind of going to further split the everyday folks, the hoi polloi, flyover country, heartland Americans, whatever you want to call them, if it's going to further split them from the political process and the elites in general.
I've seen a lot of narrative lately on Twitter and on social media in general, both on the left and the right, and I would say fairly extreme left and fairly extreme right, both saying this isn't anymore about conservative versus liberal. This is about oligarchy versus the people. Now, I don't like that language.
It starts to feel a little French.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like
revolution.
Yeah, it sounds French Revolution. It sounds Che Guevara. It has a lot of overtones I don't like. Either whether it's the right or the left saying that. Just to be clear, I don't like that phraseology. I think it's dangerous. The concept, or at least some of the concept behind it, though, is very much, establishment versus every man,
Yeah.
if I can, use that word. Every person, sorry.
You were going to give me $2,000. I was going to give you my vote. That was the deal.
Right.
Now you're in power. You've got the levers of power, and
Where's my
I'm screwed
$2,000?
over
Yeah.
yet again. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see that play out. One potential consequence, I wonder what this means, assuming these fractures exist or there is some sort of division happening wherever the fault lines might be, what that might mean for Biden's ability to accomplish other agenda items that he might have for the next 4 years, stuff that he can't do by executive order,
Yeah.
that he feels he needs Congress for, that he does need Congress for. With the divide, the Democrats have barely a majority in the Senate with the VP voting, a slightly better, but not much of a majority in the House. What does that mean for his ability to get things done for the rest of his term?
Well, I don't know. And whoever you are who's calling me, stop. I don't know. I think the GameStop thing is just, it's really kind of changed. It's opened my eyes to a few things. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it's going to do to Biden, if it's going to erode his support or if he will be able to over. The problem is Biden doesn't have a whole lot he can really offer.
Yes.
He came to office saying, okay, I'll stop the pandemic and I'll stop the Orange Man. Those are the two things he said he would do.
And
Right.
now he can't stop the pandemic, apparently. So
He can't.
Nothing he
And-
can do, and we'll be back to normal by third quarter, according to the Government Accounting Office and and the New York Times. So,
But something hit me a second ago, and then my phone rang. You didn't hear it, and it interrupted my train of thought. But anyway, something really interesting is happening with the aftermath of the Capitol riots. Not only are you seeing people who were involved in the riots now say, "Oh, we'll testify against Trump. We'll turn on him." Drudge had a headline earlier today talking about people who went to the Capitol and presumably rioted and didn't even vote. So
Right.
now that's an interesting thing, because that shows a level of disaffection that does not relate to party.
Yeah.
Or relates to party maybe only to the extent that there was one party in power and there was one party that was out of power. It does make me think that the fracture is not along the lines maybe of parties, but more along the lines of everyday disenchanted people against what they're increasingly perceiving as oligarchs. And that's dangerous. It has a self-correcting mechanism, but it can be a very dangerous, bloody mechanism.
yeah, the interesting thing to me is the people on the left who seem to be behind that narrative the most, oligarchy versus the people, all seem to think Bernie Sanders isn't part of the oligarchy, which is fascinating to me. How do you get to be, or Elizabeth Warren, how do you get to be a multimillionaire and not be a card-carrying member of the oligarchy?
I think that you're going to see possibly more of this red pilling happen, though, because now they
Even
do
on the
have,
left.
it's a slim majority, but they do have a majority. They do have the Senate effectively. They've got the House. They have the White House.
And what will they accomplish?
And what will? And these people are expecting a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
Whoever you are, you're still calling. Stop.
They're probably calling on purpose now that they've seen you messing with your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, we have been saying at Western Journal for months that Joe Biden was elected on a foundation of lies. He's not the only one using dishonesty to get ahead. Michael, you've been, I know, written a number of pieces recently about Black Lives Matter. And let me preface this with what has now become the compulsory statement, I think, that when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about the movement, the organization, not the concept that, Black Lives Matter no less than white lives. They also matter no more than white lives.
Yeah.
They matter. So, let's just get that on the table, be done with it. The organization Black Lives Matter is another question.
Yeah, so throughout 2020, we we know because of the divisive rhetoric of Black Lives Matter, they always talk about white privilege and white oppressors and how, the black community is never going to be able to succeed in this country until we have a radical revolution of our societal structures and government and things of that nature. And, despite all the destruction that has come in the wake of Black Lives Matter, they have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by some Norwegian member of parliament who seems to think that they've done a lot to forward peace over the last year. I don't know what news he was watching, but I guess probably establishment media news from America.
Probably CNN. The mostly peaceful protests of the BLM.
But and just to put this in perspective, I found this statistic from the U.S. Crisis Monitor. Black Lives Matter activists were involved in 95% of the riots that took place between June and September. And how they found that statistic was agitators arrested at Black Lives Matter protests and riots and, so forth. They all tended to be Black Lives Matter affiliated or members of a Black Lives Matter organization. So
and based on, this is a surmise on my point, or on my part rather, but I think it's probably fair. We all saw all of this violence occurring, and we know that a relatively small number of people were arrested for it.
Yes.
So one's got to believe that the people who were arrested were the more dramatic actors, right? The ones who were at least not guilty in a judicial sense, but perceived to be guilty of the more heinous activities during these events.
I, for one, definitely found that statistic to be shocking.
That's
because
huge.
I would expect there to be a lot of opportunists that have nothing to do with anything, that were just jumping in, but that's what the U.S. Crisis Monitor found. And so, Black Lives Matter now has a chance to win its Nobel Peace Prize. It'll join the likes of such great icons of peace as Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian terrorist, and
year one, Barack Obama.
Right.
Obama, Al Gore, who has done so much to advance peace, Le Duc Tho, the Vietnamese communist leader. So actually, when you think about it, Black Lives Matter kind of fits in perfectly with the rest of these.
What do all these people have in common?
Right.
Marxist ties, some strong tie to Marxist philosophy, every single one of them, including the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, but so going off on that, it seems to me that this is representative of the fact that the narrative on Black Lives Matter continues to be that it is a civil rights organization that is keeping the peace or trying to find peace. I believe net support for Black Lives Matter right now is at plus 10%. So, I mean, that's not crazy high numbers, but still, it's
not where it used to be. It used to be much higher than that even.
Yeah. Well, it definitely dropped off after the riots started. Yes. It was, much higher. But, it was at 8%, and now it's slowly climbing again. And I just wanted to throw this over to you guys and ask you, how do you think Americans will view the Black Lives Matter movement like a few decades from now? Because it seems like right now, there's not exactly a majority of them that understands it for what it really is.
There is a culture war, and the victors
who wins.
The victor who wins. Right.
That's exactly what I was thinking. No, that's exactly what I was thinking. It will be viewed the way that they are described, or it is described in history books and textbooks.
Right.
So they will be viewed, depending on who wins that culture war, either truthfully as, look, there are people involved in the organization Black Lives Matter who are sincere people of good conscience and trying to do the right thing, and they think they're involved with the organization to do the right thing. There's a history of I'm not saying anything nobody knows. There's a history of racial divide in this country that I don't want to say, I'm not going to say that whites need to take responsibility for, because that is taking it too far. Unless you perpetrated those acts, you should not take responsibility for those acts. But whites should acknowledge that, for instance, during the Martin Luther King Jr. era, when black churches marched for civil rights.
Yes.
White
Yeah.
Americans should
True.
be aware of the fact that white churches should have been marching for civil rights, and we missed the mark. By we, I mean white churches. We need to acknowledge the fact that there shouldn't have been and should not now be white and black churches. There's no reason for that. That not that you integrate churches just to integrate them, but the history of that is something that everybody should be aware of. That the goal of the church has been missed over decades. And it should not have been a bunch of powerless black people like Martin Luther King Jr. and many of his supporters who called attention to this and demanded action from white Southern politicians. It should have been white voters, and eventually it was. It became more of a integrated movement over time. Yeah. But that should absolutely have started with the people who had the power to make the change in the first place, and it didn't. That's a problem. Is it my fault? No. Do I owe anybody anything for that? No, not in any tangible sense, but a little understanding on my part is probably not a bad thing. And I think a lot of people even reject that idea. Like, I was born in 1968. It was mostly done by that time, and therefore I don't even acknowledge that it's an issue. I think that we take that too far.
Grace is a useful thing, and forgiveness is a useful thing in scenarios like this. And I was talking with another one of our editors before we came on the air, Joey, and we were talking actually about slavery and the legacy in America and these things. And it's a fascinating thing. I posted on Facebook a couple days ago asking people who follow me, can you name another country other than the U.S. or Great Britain that did more to expunge slavery? And I addressed it specifically to leftists. Right. No leftists respond. None of, and I've got a bunch of leftists. None of them responded to it. And I think you're exactly right. We do need to acknowledge and try to understand what happened there. But there also needs to be a recognition on the left in general that societal change takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so far, the West is the only group that's been able to actually deal with slavery. And it's a really fascinating thing. Because we've been able to deal with slavery, we're actually saddled with it. There's not a whole lot of condemnation of Muslim slavery. There's a little bit more condemnation of Asian slavery, what's happening with the Uyghurs and these things. But you don't see that anywhere near compared to the condemnation of what the West did. And the West is the only culture that's managed to actually do away with it. And it turns out it takes a long time to change something like that. You can't just flip a switch and decide, and for better or worse, and as much as you're right, white churches should have been out there saying, oh, wait a minute, no, we got to fix this.
Way. Yeah.
But societies stand to gain a whole lot more from being slow moving on those things than quickly embracing. If you quickly embrace something and you don't know what it is, it can kill you. If you're slow to embrace something, the chances of it killing you are a lot less.
Right.
But it also means that an injustice like that may live longer. But there's this really weird childishness on the part of the left that says, oh, as soon as you saw this was a problem, you should have fixed it. And that presumes that you're even capable of fixing something as soon as you see the problem.
Like everybody on the left, as soon as they're, they develop a cough, they run to their doctor. I mean, the leftists aren't any better at dealing with problems immediately. As soon as they get a day behind in their rent, they call their landlord to get in front of that.
Yeah, and I would quickly like to add one more note on this before we move on to the next topic. And that's, going off of what you said about societal change being slow to move forward. And, it's a lot slower to move forward when you have, the organization that's most famously purporting to help a community is actively calling for policies that do the direct opposite of helping that community.
Yeah,
and, Thomas Sowell has done some research on basically what he calls not race baiters, but I can't remember the word he uses. But basically, the types of leaders that stand up for a movement like Black Lives Matter. And basically what he found was invariably across time, there are plenty of exceptions like Martin Luther King Jr., for instance, but invariably across time, a lot of these leaders actively support policies that run to the opposite of actually helping those communities, and they have incentives to do so. So Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely they do.
If the black community does start to reach some economic mobility, that's less money in the pockets
100%.
of people at the Black Lives Matter organization.
Great point.
That's absolutely
Great
right. Jerry Pournelle, one of my favorite authors, made the point in a piece of fiction at one point that as soon as you put somebody in charge of poverty, their number one incentive becomes to make sure there are as many poor people as there possibly can be, because that makes them more important, more powerful.
Cynical sounding, but true.
But it's absolutely truth. And that's why the only way to really address those things long term, you can't do it governmentally. You have to do it locally in very small groups, local churches, addressing family units. You know, nobody has any. I'd never met a church member interested in alleviating hunger locally who then went out to try to make sure more people were hungry so that they could, you know, feel more important about themselves. It doesn't work that way. But when you're being paid a 6 or a 7-figure salary to, you know, address the hunger issue, your goal is to make sure everybody knows how bad the hunger issue is, and the bigger you can make it, the more important you are.
And Black Lives Matter is receiving billions of dollars in donations throughout all of this, and as long as the rhetoric stays as heated as possible, they're going to receive as much money as that.
Yeah, millions.
Yeah.
Until the narrative changes, and that's the issue is, you know, who writes the history books, who's writing the history books now.
So that's a great point.
You're welcome.
Who is writing the history books right now? So something we say we're with WJ Live. You're watching WJ Live. We say we're powered by the Western Journal. The Western Journal is a news and commentary website from a Christian conservative perspective. We do a lot of content distribution through social media, through Facebook and Twitter, and increasingly Cloud Hub and Parler and these other platforms. Parler when it gets back, and these other platforms.
Someday again, Parler. Gab.
So one of the things that you don't get to see because you're not here with us, but every now and then a fact checker will go in and we'll look at something we have written and we'll decide that it is not up to snuff. And they will pass word to the social media companies. The social media companies will smack us on the knuckles and potentially even throttle the amount of traffic we get. In other words, they implement shadow bans of some sort, and that keeps people from seeing the content that we put out there. We had one happen recently. I'm probably going to not give you the chance to rant about that because we're running over time.
Yeah, I will rant about it if you throw it to me.
But I want to talk about fact checkers are being used right now, not really to check facts, but as gatekeepers to control the narrative and say who can say what about what.
Of truth.
Arbiters of truth, exactly. So a story you guys might have seen recently, in fact, you almost certainly have, is that after Joe Biden pretty much tanked the Keystone Pipeline deal, that thousands of jobs were lost. Now, the figure that was going around was between 8,000 and 11,000. About 8,000 of those were supposed to be union jobs. Fact checkers have come in since then and have said, whoa, wait a minute. This is missing context. And that is newspeak. That is fact checker speak for, I don't like this. I can't do anything about it, but I don't like it. And so I'm going to throw a flag.
Right.
And basically what the fact checkers have come in and said is that, well, look, a lot of these jobs were not permanent jobs. Yeah, there were thousands of jobs, and those thousands of jobs have gone away, but they weren't permanent jobs.
Yeah.
They weren't going to always be there building the pipeline.
Which is super, super comforting to the people who aren't getting paid now.
To the 8,000 to 11,000 people
who
are not getting paid
temporary
anymore.
jobs.
And whether the fact checkers would like to believe it or not, they actually do take construction workers into account when they look at job and jobless less numbers. And that's what they're talking about. They're saying, well, it's not going to take forever to build the pipeline. These are 4 to 8 month jobs. After that, they go away. The problem is the people don't go away. The people then go on and get the next
another
pipeline job or whatever
right,
this is. And so these people, they're absolutely being fired. They're absolutely being let go. And these are absolutely real jobs. And it is another failure of the gutless, classless, disgusting journalist chattering class out there who can't relate to people who have had a temporary job and who count on moving from job to job to stay afloat. These people get to sit behind their stupid keyboards and their stupid monitors and write this crap all day long, and they don't have to worry about going out and finding what the next steel job is, or what the next pipeline job is, or what the next oil rig job is. And so they sit back there and they say, oh no, these aren't really real jobs. And it is absolute bull.
Well, the truth of the matter is that the chattering class, as you so accurately called them, never considered these real jobs. These are people who work with their hands.
Right. Yeah,
they don't think, they don't type. Yeah. They actually go out and build something that wasn't there before. That's not a real job. They don't work for the government. They don't work in a think tank. They don't work in media. Therefore, they're not real jobs.
They're to be gotten rid of, outsourced. We'll get people in Asia to do this.
Kerry's comment was brilliant. John Kerry's, they've made poor choices. They need to make better choices. Let them build solar panels.
Learn to code.
Yeah, that's pretty much. It was a Marie Antoinette moment.
Poisonous.
Yeah,
which are poisonous.
Right. Let them make solar panels. It was a perfect example, the quintessential example of liberal thinking on this kind of thing. Yeah. You know what? You're a pipe fitter? Never mind. Go work in a factory. Building solar panels. Those are essentially the same things. I don't know how to do either one of them as John Kerry, so they must be, and I know people who do them, or I've seen them on TV, and they don't seem all that bright. So they certainly haven't read my book. So if they can pipe fit, not a verb.
No, pipe fitting.
Well, pipe fitter is a verb. I don't think pipe fit's a verb, but either way.
Yeah.
If they can do that, then they can do this. Let them collect garbage for a living. Let them pick up a chainsaw and become a lumberjack. It's all the same to the John Kerrys of the world. They can't tell any difference. You didn't throw it to me, and I ranted anyway. But
it's absolutely true. And I would love to see John Kerry try to do anything with his hands.
I'd love to see him change a tire on his car.
Yeah. I mean, these are, and that's the problem.
Cars.
That's increasingly the problem. I'm far less worried right now as far as the country goes with the Democrat-Republican divide than I am between increasingly what I think thinks of itself as a proletariat and a very small bourgeois minority who are essentially oligarchs.
That really opens itself up to the Bernie people and the AOC people to swoop in and take advantage of that sentiment.
But there's a really interesting thing. When Ted Cruz and AOC aligned on GameStop, it was a remarkable moment.
Right.
Turns out there are excesses the extent to which both sides object to. And so, maybe we are in the midst of a far more interesting realignment. That's what I would like.
Yeah, the difference is that the AOCs of the world say, look how bad that is. The government needs to control it more, and it will get better, because that always works. Versus the right that says, look how bad that is. It's because too much power is concentrated in the hands of too few people. Yeah. And AOC's answer to that is literally to concentrate more power in the hands of fewer people.
Hopefully that's the case. I think among conservatives that is the case. Yes. I don't know that that's the case among Republicans anymore. You could smell House and Senate Republicans closing ranks. We really don't want to tick off the hedge fund guys.
Right, because they're totally indebted to the hedge fund guys. And in fact, many of them are hedge fund guys.
This is a huge problem. I think this is potentially a civilizational issue.
I wish I could argue with that. All right, Michael, last word on that before we, as Josh said, we are getting a little late on time.
Yeah, one side is wanting more freedom, the other side is wanting more control. It should be pretty easy to determine which side is right, but you never know with the way narratives are spun nowadays. So
it is frightening. But I remain ever the optimist. America is an amazing country full of amazing people, and there are certainly days that I get up in the morning, more days now than used to be honest with you. But I get up in the morning and I think, is this the day? Do I really want to go back in these trenches one more time? And so far the answer has almost always been yes. Once in a while, a mental health day is called for, but those are pretty few and far between. Most days, the answer is yes, because the country is worth fighting for. My children and my grandchildren, and God save the Queen, even you guys, are worth fighting for, in my opinion. And if that means, getting beaten up on Twitter once in a while to, try to make a point, then, better men than I have sacrificed a lot more than that for the future of this country. So, so far anyway, I keep getting out of bed and I keep doing it. And one of the reasons I keep doing that is because of our viewers and our readers who we just absolutely could not do this without. And so to close today, I wanted to mention, I mentioned very early on that we're redesigning our website. We're doing that to make it more useful, we hope, to you, more attractive even, to make that search function actually usable by humans. And we thought that might be a nice factor to get in there. You can help us do that. The most important way that you can help us do that is to become a subscriber to the Western Journal, which is super easy to do. Go to westernjournal.com/join. It's right there on the screen. But if you're listening to us on an audio podcast, I'll say it again. It's westernjournal.com/join. You'll see a number of different options for different types of subscriptions that you can get with us. I think the least expensive one is about $5 a month. I should probably go look that up so I can give you an actual number, but I think that's about right. It's in other words, it's not a lot. Skip one Starbucks trip a month and you will cover this, and you will stop supporting a absolutely terrible company. So that's a win-win. This money goes to things like redesigning a website so that we can reach more people and they can use it with a better user experience. It goes to things like putting on a podcast like this where we can equip viewers and listeners like you with the truth, which is our goal here. It goes to paying journalists to dig into things like the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah, journalists like our
crack reporters.
What did I say? Crack reporter. Yeah. That's right. Not Crackerjack. Crack. He hasn't been promoted yet. It goes into all those kinds of things that we can only do when you support us. So westernjournal.com/join is just a great way to do that. I promise you, we will be as wise as we know how to be with every penny that you put into a subscription. That way, we do not throw money around here by any stretch of the imagination. Biggest celebration we've had here recently was I bought 3 dozen donuts. That's kind of a big day around here. So we don't spend that money just to spend it. We invest everything we can in bringing you truth. That's what's important to us. So please visit us there, westernjournal.com/join, and consider becoming a subscriber today. We very much appreciate that, as we very much appreciate you staying with us for WJ Live today, powered by the Western Journal. We're here every weekday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Not always me. It's some varied group of individuals will be here to bring you the truth, to help equip you with that, help you discern and understand what's going on in the world around you. We've got some smart people working on that every day. If you don't watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/WJ Live, you can find us on wherever you listen to your audio podcasts, and we find us on pretty much social media anywhere, Facebook, Twitter as well. They'll all point you to the podcast. And we hope to see you here every day, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Thanks for joining us. As always, stay safe.
Hey, guys. Huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. Sounds good. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Sam, we're going to need a slot for that story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.